Welcome back, everyone. TV5 News at 9. Time now for Education Matters. We're here with Dr. Craig Douglas, of course. Dr. Douglas, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good.
Very good. Okay, so it's Black History Month right now. We're highlighting a figure in Black history that you may or may not know. So, Dr. Douglas, start us off telling us about Vivian Thomas and the work that he did.
Fascinating story. I want to thank my colleague Tracy White, who put me on to this story. To be honest with you, I'm not a historian myself, but I had not heard of the gentleman. And yes, Vivian was a gentleman born in 1910. Back in the day, the name Vivian was for both boys and girls, more common today, of course, for women. So here's this African American. He's born, like I say, in 1910. His dad was a carpenter. And reading up on his background, he liked to go around and help his dad. And he was kind of a shadow of his dad, would hand him tools, watched his dad a lot. That was an important skill set that he built. So when he graduated from high school, he wanted to go to college and didn't have a penny, to be honest with you. So he took a job at Vanderbilt University working in a lab. He wanted to go to college, didn't have money for it, but there he was working at a college. And lo and behold, good fortune prevailed in that he worked for a surgeon in an experimental laboratory setting. Now, part of the story has some troubling parts. They did a lot of experimentation back in the day. This had been, what, in the 1930s, with animals. So Thomas didn't have to be a surgeon to operate on animals, right? So he was allowed to do that. Again, that's a little bit disconcerting being an animal lover. But anyway, he developed these skills without going to college. And the gentleman he worked for, the surgeon, was Dr. Baylock, and Dr. Baylock then realized Thomas's skills. I mean, he was no dummy, so he used Thomas's skills to help perfect these surgical techniques. Now, it's hard for us, Blake, to kind of remember what that must have been like back in the 30s. And everything's pretty crude. No one did surgery on hearts back then, for example. Well, in their work at Vanderbilt, Baylock ended up getting a chance to go to Johns Hopkins, and again, he knew of Thomas, so he took Thomas with him. All this time, Thomas is not going to college. He had saved for some college, but then the Depression hit, wiped him out. So, I mean, it's a story of persistence. It's a story of grit, and it's a story of not having the formal training, but having the skill set. And one of the techniques that Thomas actually perfected, that Baylock was able to implement and write about, was a technique to help blue babies. Now, I'm not an expert in medicine either, but a blue baby was born back in the day lacking oxygen, hence they turned blue. Well, Thomas figured out a way to bypass and be able to amend whatever the internal mechanisms were that were not working, and actually it was a life-saving technique. So imagine these babies that were actually starving to death for oxygen were able to live and survive and thrive. So it's a pretty cool story. And again, this gentleman never had formal training. He had the ability and the skill set, though, to make up for it.
And the drive.
And the drive.
Yeah, never give up. So, you know, you said he didn't have a penny to his name and, you know, maybe not the correct type of skill set, but it helped the ones that he had. Any other hardships that he had overcome that you can think of?
Yeah, it was a tough time racially. Johns Hopkins, located near Baltimore. Baltimore was a very racist environment at that time. Would have been, what, late 30s, early 40s time frame. And he was not treated very well at Johns Hopkins by his co-workers. African Americans that worked at Johns Hopkins were stereotypically cleaners, custodial people. And so he was not given the respect that he should have been given. And fortunately, Johns Hopkins as an institution ended up recognizing that and tried to make amends, and actually had a dedicated statue made for him, I believe in 1976. He passed in '85, so it was prior to him passing. So he was able to, late in life, get some well-deserved recognition. He was actually given a title of overseeing the surgical procedures at Johns Hopkins. So even though he wasn't a doctor, he was given an honorary doctorate and had a lot of respect due. Again, I appreciate Ms. White turning me on to this. It was a gentleman I had not read about before, and it just is a great lesson in persistence and overcoming odds.
Why would you say it's so important for us to hear, little anecdotes and learn history like this, especially during Black History Month?
I think for inspiration.
Yeah.
For inspiration for all of us of all races, and for us to understand the context of how far African Americans have come,
Yeah.
and how far as a society we have come, but yet how much farther as a society we need to go. We're not there yet. Dr. King talked about that back in the day. We have not arrived yet, and we need to continue to work hard to strive for those ideals that he expounded.
And before we go, any advice to parents or students who, want to expand their Black history knowledge and research?
I just would encourage you to explore in your local library,
Yeah.
On the internet. The internet's a great resource. Your school teacher, and Ms. White's a good example of that. She had done the research and she presented it to her class, and so I borrowed it for this segment, and I appreciate that. By sharing information and being good storytellers ourselves, we can help direct people to these kinds of great examples. What a great example Vivian Thomas is for all of us.
Is Miss White currently teaching at a public school?
Yeah, she's an excellent teacher at Bay City's Eastern High School. That's her alternative ed school.
Okay.
She does a wonderful job. The whole staff is stellar. I mean, these are students that are alternative ed. They've either washed out or changed programs, and so they're there for a last chance, and they thrive in that environment. I'm privileged to be able to work there periodically and see the good work that they're doing there.
Dr. Douglas, thank you for your time bringing this to us.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You as well. For more information about today's topic, you can find it by going to the 9 a.m. guest page under features in the tab on WNEM.com.